What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so let's get into this one. So one of the biggest knocks on uh, one of the biggest knocks in recent NBA has been the uh, tendency, starting in the LeBron James era, of players forming super teams, players colluding one another to join super teams, which ultimately ruined the competitive balance of the NBA. It made basketball, for most NBA fans, unfun to watch. Maybe it made it easier for analysts to do their jobs because they only really had to follow four or five teams. And that's led to the lazy journalism that we see today, where they only fixated on talking about two or three teams and maybe 9 to 10 of the 400 plus players that play in the NBA. This is one of the stains that many people see on the legacy of LeBron James and, to a slightly lesser extent, Kevin Durant. Though there have been other players who have partaken in this, although in recent years we haven't seen as much of this or attempt of this. Some of it because I think the younger players see the criticisms that have been levied at the players um, of the past 10 to 15 years who have engaged in that. And also, one of the reasons why you don't see it anymore is because of the second apron rule, which makes it far more difficult for teams to be able to sign multiple superstars. It basically, you know, forces teams at best to cultivate talent. And then, maybe you have that talent during the rookie year deals or what have you, or in between medium to large contracts. But other than that, it really has brought back the competitive balance of the NBA. You don't really see dynasties anymore. I think the Warriors may be the last dynasty that we see for quite some time, although I know the Thunder may have something to say about that. But anyway, Charles Barkley is a fan of the second apron rule because he feels that it was needed. Because as he's put it time and time and time again, these guys don't want to compete. So he was on the Bill Simmons podcast and he got into it a little bit with Bill Simmons, who's not a fan of the second apron rule. But Charles explained why he is a backer of the second apron rule.
The second apron thing
is... Hey, cut the bullshit. They ain't got no dumb rules. Let me tell you something. I'm so glad you asked that question.
Is this a second apron defense?
Yes. Why did they have to come up with bullshit rules, Bill? Because all these guys want to play together and not compete. If I had $1 for every time I heard the second apron, why did Adam Silver have to put the second apron in? Because LeBron got all his guys together. KD wanted to go play with the Warriors. I hate when I hear, man, the second apron's not fair. What do you mean it's not fair? If y'all stop all wanting to play together, we wouldn't have to make up bogus-ass rules to stop y'all from playing together.
This is interesting because I completely disagree with you.
Okay.
I think they came up with it because the Players Association, I don't think, realized that putting these rules in is going to make all these teams blow up, and you're basically going to be able to afford 2 or 3 guys max, and then you're going to have to cut corners everywhere else. Like the Celtics, they had no chance of keeping Drew Holiday and Porzingis. Like OKC now. They've made all of these really smart moves to put the roster they have together, and they're not going to be able to keep it together even though they were smart. I don't like penalizing people for smart.
Well, Bill Simmons can think what he wants to think. I tend to agree with Charles Barkley. No matter what the ultimate reason for the second apron rule, it definitely has cut into the shenanigans as far as deck stacking that we were seeing in the 2000 teens. I mean, it was to the point where you could pencil in, for the most part, for a good 4 or 5 year window, the 1 or 2 teams that even had a remote chance of making it to the NBA Finals. And that's just not good for basketball, right? So leave it to LeBron James' Minion Richard Jefferson, to come at Charles Barkley and call him a hypocrite. And I already know what this is. They're going to talk about how Charles played on a super team Sixers team and a super team Rockets team. It's so predictable. I haven't even looked at this clip yet. I saw the headline. I said, that's probably what he's going to be talking about. Let's see.
Why do we always make it seem like LeBron is the first person to ever join up in NBA history?
Charles Barkley said the second apron exists because players are soft and want to team up.
Social media team, get ready. This is a clip. We're about to social this. Really quickly, I remember Charles Barkley got drafted to a team with Moses Malone, maybe Dr. J, and Maurice Cheeks. Then I remember Charles Barkley going to Houston, and then he teamed up with Akeem Olajuwon. And then Scottie Pippen was also there. That sounds like teaming up if I'm wrong, right? Hey, let's go to Shaq and Kobe. Does everybody remember when they recruited Gary Payton, who was still in his prime, and then they recruited Karl Malone? Do we remember that? The second all-time leading scorer to play power forward next to Shaq in his prime after they had won 3 out of the last 4 championships? So when we look at teaming up, he did it. He joined Olajuwon. And then Scottie Pippen came in. And now we're talking about the second apron exists. Did we forget our history? His own history. And I love Charles. Charles is my icon, my idol, my big bro. There's not a person in this industry that I don't love, that I fucking fuck with more. But Charles, let's be honest. You literally joined a team with Akeem Olajuwon because he had won 2 championships. Sounds like, wow, that sounds like maybe LeBron going and joining D Wade. And then you brought in Scottie Pippen. Man, that sounds like Chris Bosh joining.
You know, I've heard this before, and it sounds really good out of context. If you don't put context into it, it sounds like, boom, he's cooking. But number one, let's talk about the 84-85 Sixers, okay? That team was 2 years removed from that dominant NBA championship run when they went 65-17, right? 12-1 in the playoffs. I think it was the very next year they added the another round of playoffs to make it 4 rounds. The 84 Sixers, who were the defending champions, people forget were eliminated in the first round by the Nets, of all people. The Nets. They went from 65 wins to, I believe, 56 wins. And a lot of it had to do with injuries. But let's look at something here. 84-85 was the first year that you saw slippage in Moses Malone's dominance. You could argue 83-84 really, but 84-85 was, I think, the first year you start seeing slippage in his dominance. He was no longer the guy going out there putting up 27 and 15 or 30 and 16. He was now becoming the guy putting up more around 23, 24, and 12, which is still great numbers. But Moses was slowing down a little bit. Although he was still playing at an all-star level for several more years, he was starting to wear down a bit. Dr. J was declining further. He was no longer one of the top 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 players in the league. He was probably at that point, by 85, Dr. J might have been outside of the top 10, maybe top 15 borderline as far as players in the league. All right. And that's pushing it. He was sliding. Andrew Toney was starting to break down. He didn't mention Andrew Toney. Andrew Toney was critical for those 76ers runs in the early to mid 1980s. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons, the main reason why the Boston Celtics acquired Dennis Johnson was because they needed someone that could slow down Andrew Toney. Andrew Toney was called the Boston Strangler for a reason. Andrew Toney was starting to break down. So this was no longer the juggernaut Sixers team. They were a good team, but they were no longer in the championship window. As a matter of fact, I would argue by 85, the Boston Celtics were the best team in the Eastern Conference, followed by the Milwaukee Bucks, who won 59 games that year, and a team that was on the rise at that time in the East was none other than the Detroit Pistons, but they were still a few moves away. They were a trade and a few draft picks away from getting to that level. But the Sixers were still on a slow downward trajectory. So that's not put into context when Barkley got there. Matter of fact, by the time Barkley fully took over that team, Moses had been traded, Dr. J was retired, and Tony was almost all but retired, just about. I think he retired in '88. And Maurice Cheeks, I think, had a couple more years there, and then he became more of a veteran journeyman after that. Now, about the Houston Rockets, they were back-to-back champions, right? But in 95, 96, they were eliminated in the first round by the Seattle Supersonics as defending champions. And much of their core was aging or gone by the 96-97 season. They weren't the same team. They weren't nearly the same team by 96-97. Vernon Maxwell was gone. Kenny Smith was gone. You know? Robert Horry was gone. I think Mario Elie was still there. Sam Cassell, I think, was gone. They weren't the same team by 96-97. And they did still have Clyde Drexler, but Drexler was a shell of himself after the injuries. Barkley was still an all-star level player, but he was not the MVP Barkley from a few years earlier. Olajuwon was sliding down. And then he talks about them getting Scottie Pippen, but that wasn't until the 98-99 season when they had deteriorated further. So it sounds good, Richard Jefferson, you fucking LeBron minion, but you got to put context into this thing. And then you talk about Shaq and Kobe. That wasn't even mentioned. So that's how you know this is some LeBron minion clutch sports propaganda bullshit. Gotta shit on Kobe. Gotta always do it. But let's look at the meat of the coconut here. Gary Payton was in his prime in 2003, 2004. He was starting to slip. Remember, he was acquired by the Bucks. I think he played 1 year in Boston. And then he went to the Lakers. And I think by that point in time, he was 35, 36 years old. And he was starting to slip a little bit, especially on the defensive end. Karl Malone was 40, going on 41. So this ain't, Gary Payton and Karl Malone from 97. Then you have a real argument there. Also, the biggest difference is, aside from the ages and the stages of their careers, these guys weren't colluding with one another. They weren't conspiring to sign up with one another. They weren't having clandestine meetings with one another, sneaking around, trying to team up with each other. LeBron didn't inform his teammates in Miami. Shout out to his brother Apex Jones putting this out there. LeBron didn't inform his teammates in Miami that he was leaving until about 10 minutes before it was announced that he was going back to Cleveland. We saw how KD snaked his teammates. He did the same fucking thing. The same KD that shitted on LeBron for not playing competitive basketball back in 2010. He did the same thing. So no, it's not the same. It's not. They weren't colluding with one another in their primes and to join other teams. And Charles Barkley definitely, Kobe Bryant definitely, none of these guys would ever join a team that just eliminated them in the playoffs. And no, the Rockets didn't do that. That Rockets team that eliminated Barkley did that 2 years before he joined that Rockets team, which was a totally different team. And the Houston Rockets were in rebuild mode in 96. Prior year, 95, 96, going 41-41 during the regular season. They were in rebuild mode. Dan Marley was gone via free agency. Kevin Kevin Johnson was getting ready to retire, as opposed to when Kevin Durant left the Thunder, they went to the Western Conference Finals. So don't even try this shit. It's not even the same, nigga. Anyway, that's all I got to say about it. Richard Jefferson's so shameless, man. How about y'all want to bet Richard Jefferson gonna be the first one this year talking about how LeBron needs help? LeBron needs help. I mean, people get mad when I say it, but he clearly needs help. Luka's just not getting it done. I mean, shut up, man.